Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'd like to discuss in this monologue, I'd like to discuss why I will not be supporting a Democrat for president in 2020. Now, I am what you might call a swing voter or middle of the line voter, one who is at least considering to some extent voting for either one, Democrat or Republican. In 2012, I voted for Obama. In 2016, I strongly supported Bernie Sanders, and then when Clinton won the nomination, I warmed up to Trump, and I eventually became a pretty solid supporter of his, even though I don't support him blindly, and there are plenty of policies that I disagree with him with. So overall, I am independent. I am both independent in the political sense, in the classical sense, but I'm also independently minded. Like I don't blindly follow either party. I'm not a partisan. And so people like me are very important to the electoral process, right? I'm persuadable. I'm also one of those, like I said, one of those demographic that essentially got Trump elected, right? Because I also got Obama elected. Um, but I'm also one of those people who supported Bernie Sanders and then switched to Trump. That's also about 13%, I believe, of Sanders supporters did so. Anyway, um, I think it might be accurate to say that if the Democrats cannot peel off my type of demographic for the 2020 election, then they will lose because you're going to have a repeat of what happened in 2016, which is essentially that Obama voters had abandoned the Democratic Party in favor of Trump. So I mean, you already know the story, right? The Rust Belt. Clinton didn't appeal to that demographic, and they just left her. They left the party, and that's it. So unless the Democratic Party can somehow recapture those voters, then they're going to lose again. That's I think a very succinct and straightforward way of putting it. And so I'm here to tell you that they're not recapturing my heart and mind, whatever they're doing. So here's why. So obviously you had a few weeks ago, it was the last week, you had 20 candidates going on stage and vying with one another for the vote. I think it was a big mistake what these people did. Nobody wanted to be vulnerable to attack from the left, so they all out-lefted one another. It was a mistake. It was a big mistake because why? For two reasons. Number one is that if you're going to be like everyone else, remember, there's 20 people out there. If you're going to be just like everybody else, you're not going to stand out. You're not going to stand out from the pack, and you're not going to win the nomination. So the only way you can afford such a strategy is if you're Joe Biden, maybe, but he isn't actually doing so. Sanders, Warren, maybe, but anyone else, you can't do that. You can't get away with it because you're essentially a dark horse, like nobody knows you, and you want to make a name for yourself, so you have to distinguish yourself. You can't just say, I'm also progressive. But the other reason why this was a mistake is that they don't appeal to moderate voters, and you cannot win a general election. I mean, if your goal is to win the nomination and somehow capitalize on that, which there's plenty of opportunities for that, by the way. I mean, Clinton wrote a book after accomplishing nothing essentially in her whole life, but she wrote several books. Recently, she wrote a book after she lost the presidency in 2016, and people, and I suppose people buy the book. Um, so you might be able, if that's your strategy, sure. But if your strategy is to actually win the general election, then that's not going to work. You can't just be a fervent progressive and hope to win a general election. It's just not going to happen. So I am here to tell you why it's not going to happen. So there's several things about me. Number one is that I am persuadable, like I said, and I am relatively centrist, relatively moderate. I'm kind of eclectic, if you may. I pick and choose. I'm not down the line liberal, and I'm not down the line conservative. In general, I would say that the issues that I tend to be liberal on is economy. economic issues that tend to be more progressive. I shouldn't use the word liberal because it just has so many different definitions. But progressive is a better way to define it. I tend to be more progressive. In other words, namely, I tend to believe in more egalitarianism when it comes to the economy, that we should redistribute the income more, we should tax the rich more, and we should somehow ensure that our economy works better for workers and low income folk. Um, so, so that's on the one hand. Economically, I'm a progressive, but I'm also socially, I'm conservative, right? I lean conservative. Okay. So, having said that, let me jump right in and discuss several of the issues that are being articulated by the candidates on the Democratic side. Okay, so I have the candidate that I am most considering, and I am secretly rooting for, even though I'm not right now. I mean, they can still persuade me possibly, but I don't like them as much as I used to. Is Bernie Sanders. So Bernie Sanders, I was a huge supporter of his in 2016. There are several reasons why I no longer support him. One is personally, I personally have veered right. I've just changed my ideology. So that's one thing. But I also feel that he has changed. He has become more progressive, and not just socially, but also not just economically, but also socially. Which, as I said earlier, I am not a social progressive. I am a social conservative. So we've kind of like, we used to be quite aligned, and then it became, there's more of a chasm between me and him, and now it's just, I don't know. It's just I can no longer support him. It's just his downsides are starker and more effectual, more significant than his plus side and his upside. So let me go through, since he is a candidate that I would most likely or most consider voting for, I want to go through his policy positions and see what I agree and what I don't agree with him. So let's look at education. So I remember in 2016, I that's one of the things that I was a little bit apprehensive about. Whenever I heard him say that we want to make college free for everyone, I always was hoping that he would say everyone who demonstrated the aptitude and the aptitude to benefit from the type of curriculum that college is meant for. But he never said that, and it always bothered me a little. And but I kind of overlooked it because on almost all of the other policy positions, I agreed with him. But right now, I'm looking at the details of his policy proposal with respect to education, and he's doing more damage than good. So let me just point out several other things. Okay, free public colleges. He's proposing that state public colleges, should be free. I think I'm not 100% sure, but these are essentially state colleges. So I think that what he wants to do is um, uh, just kind of persuade the states to make it free because it's not a federal matter. And he's also offering incentives for that. He wants to give federal grants to states slash colleges, public colleges within states that are making themselves available to poor students for free, tuition free. So that's kind of the strategy. Again, he's not. It's one of the things that I don't like about him is that he tells you his goals, but he doesn't tell you how he's going to get there. Like, we're going to cancel all student debt. Like, what does that mean? So you really try to conjecture at some point as to what that exactly means. Um, I believe it means, I was actually reading through the text and I just couldn't get a very definitive answer to this, but I think that what he means is that the government will pay for the debt. It doesn't mean that the debt is literally canceled, which is it doesn't exist, right, by fiat, and then the creditor doesn't get paid. What he's trying to do is he's trying to do a bailout similar to what Wall Street received in 2010. So he wants to give a similar bailout to college students, right? If they got a bailout, why can't you? And so, like I said earlier, economically, I tend to sympathize with him a lot, and I'm very much against Wall Street. I believe they should be taxed a lot more, and this was my weakness for him, and that's why I supported him in 2016. But and I strongly believe that the bailout was a mistake. I've always believed that. I still believe that it was a mistake. You should have let them fail. They're basically holding the entire economy hostage and saying, "Hey, if you don't give me the money, then everything is going to implode." And we should have called their bluff. Really, it's going to implode? Okay, well, so be it. I don't think it would have, but even if it would have, they would have suffered the most, and they need to suffer. We need to have a policy that if you engage in behavior that is negligent and that is reckless, then you need to suffer. Very simple. And so, by the same token, if they should have been allowed to fail, and by the same token, people who took out loans um, without any possibility to repay them, and now they can't repay them. I'm talking about college loans. I'm sorry, the government can't be stepping in to fix your mistakes. You made a mistake. At the end of the day, you made a mistake. There's no justification for going to school. I mean, it's a decision you're making. It's a monumental decision. You go to school for 4 years. You need to know the job market. You need to know that you'll be able to repay it. You need to be able that you need to know that it's worthwhile. That's a good investment in yourself. Penny wise. I mean, you have to add up the numbers. If you're spending, I'm hearing nowadays people spending over $120,000 on med school. I mean, you can't just assume that, oh yeah, I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to make a lot of money and blah blah blah. It's when it comes to such large numbers, that's going to be bearing down on you for many years, and you also have to consider that, what is the price differential? I mean, the earning differential between what you would make if you don't go to school at all, if you don't assume $120,000 in debt, and when you do, and also you have to take into account how happy you would be. So there's a lot of factors going in to that, and people who just blindly fall for the I'm going to just take a high income job and I'm going to train for it no matter what, no matter how much it costs, is a mistake. And if they, in the end, they are unable to repay it, then the government should not be bailing them out. So I am against that. But the tax on Wall Street, I am in favor of. So I like that part of Senator Sanders' proposal. So here's one of the things that I'm very much against about this education plan of his. He says that the government should cover not just educational expenses, but also non-educational expenses. So this ties into what I said earlier. I don't like the fact that he's supporting it for everyone, regardless of abilities. Because my biggest fear, regarding free college universities for all, is that people who are not suitable for college. And by the way, I strongly believe that not everyone is like, I'm a traditionalist, a conservative. Remember, I said I'm a social conservative? So yeah, social conservatives believe that many people should be going to trade schools and they should not be embarking on a liberal education. And so I don't think everyone is suitable for college, certainly not for a 4-year degree. And he's just essentially encouraging everyone to do it, regardless of any association, any correlation between that and a better job. In terms of a direct logical correlation, as in I'm training for that and I'm then getting that because I've trained for it, not because employers think that you're a better employee because it's a signal. There's this whole theory going on that education, the value of a 4-year degree is not inherent in the degree, but it's rather the signaling that you're a responsible person, etc. Anyway, so yeah, so I fear this is something that I very much object to. I don't like it at all. The government paying for other expenses, because then you're only exacerbating the problem of people who are unqualified and are not academically minded attending these schools, because essentially they're getting an additional 3 years, additional 4 years of life of free, all expenses paid. Instead of the daddy paying it, now the government is paying it. Is paying for it, right? You get free housing. That's what he's proposing: free housing, transportation, books, supplies, food, everything included. So you don't have to learn. You just an additional. You're basically extending your childhood by 4 years. That's the effect of it, and that's a terrible idea. I don't like that at all. Um, so yeah, so I don't like that. So like I said, there's two things that I object mostly to his educational plan. I can live with making public universities free, but you have to be selective in the admission. You just have to be selective, and that's how. By the way, he is reminiscing about how things were 60 years ago. That public universities were virtually free, and if you really want to revert to that, and if you're really idealizing that era in American history, then let's do it all the way. Let's be selective, because back then, um, people were not everyone went to college, and those who did want to go to college, not everyone was accepted necessarily. So yeah, so let's do that even at the state level. Nowadays, the most selective schools are not the state schools, but rather the private Ivy League prestigious schools. Okay, so a cap on student interest, that makes sense. If the government is gonna guarantee those interest rates, or actually give the loans themselves, which is currently the case, then yes, the government shouldn't be profiting. So that's not. I have no problem with that. Um, so to summarize, on education, it's kind of a mixed bag. I think I'm overall I'm more opposed than favorable. In 2016, I tended to be mostly favorable, and I cringed a little when I heard, when he didn't qualify that slogan of free education for all, with limiting it to income. I'm sorry, to um, academic ability. All right, so I cringed at that, but now I cringe at most of the things that he says, but some of the things I support. Okay, moving on. The fight for workers. So he wants a $15 minimum wage. I definitely think people should get paid more. So we're on the same page on that. A lot of the things that I am with Bernie Sanders on are his goals. Like when he articulates goals, then I'm with you. I'm with you, sir. so it's kind of like um, it's sometimes difficult to set myself apart from him, because it's easy to get swept up with a politician who proposes goals that you agree with, but he's not getting there the right way. So yeah, I definitely think that it's a huge problem that people are making so little. They are worth so little to an employer. But mm, I would heap the bulk of this blame to the presence of illegal immigrants. They are the ones taking away the jobs. Of course, Sanders would shudder at hearing this. He thinks it's all the corporations, the greedy corporations, and he has a point. I'm not going to say, again, this is why I have this weak spot for him, because there's a lot of things that he says and he advocates that I agree with. And so, yes, I do believe that capitalism has gone awry, and the corporations and the wealthy individuals are making way too much money compared to what what the poor people are making, and we need to do something about it. But at the same time, you have to look at other ways of rectifying this. A high minimum wage is not necessarily a solution, but I'm not that opposed to this either. If this were truly enforceable, meaning if everyone were paid $15, even an illegal immigrant, then I would be okay with it. But like I said, if we don't have illegal immigration, then you don't need the law, because there will be a limited supply of workers, and you would be forced, as an employer, you would be forced to pay a living wage, because you would not be able to rely on cheap illegal labor. So that's the story with the minimum wage. Universal childcare / pre-K, sure, I agree. I am for it. Ideally, in a perfect world, and many people are not going to like me saying this, but in a perfect world, you would go back to an era when women took care of children and it didn't work, or at least it didn't work while they were bearing and raising children. But of course, that's a very sensitive subject to tackle. Of course, you'd be turning off most women voters if you'd say this, even though I think it's an eminently reasonable and moderate position to have. But yeah. But anyway, but overall, I don't see the huge harm in this, since women are. And the way I see it is the horse has left the barn at this point, and it's very difficult to reverse this socioeconomic trend of women attempting and actually achieving to a large extent pay and career equity with men. Like they're doing the same career path as men, and wanting to make the same type of money, et cetera, et cetera. And given that that's the case, yes, children are going to need care because the woman is not going to be home to care for them. Okay. And in large part, by the way, this just levels the inequality of middle/upper class women and lower class, because the upper class women have the types of work that makes it much more economical for them to hire someone or to pay for childcare, because they're making enough money that the, let's say, 10, 15, or even $20,000 that they're paying for childcare per year is worth their while. Whereas for low income folk, it's not a viable economic proposition, and therefore they are forced to either make a very poor economic choice of working for poor wages and then having to pay for childcare most of that income, or they're forced to stay home and they're unable to bring in an income. So either way, this exacerbates the income inequality. So like I said, there's plenty of plus to this. Okay, Sanders proposes paid family, medical, sick, vacation leave. That's a mouthful there. Family leave is a parent, pretty sure it's a parent, either father or mother. They have a child, they should be able to take a break, take leave, and get paid for it. Now, we already have laws, I believe. I'm not sure exactly if it's federal or state, and whether it's binding on all the private sector or not. But we already have laws in place that say that if a woman takes some time off for having a baby, that she cannot be fired. She has to be rehired when she returns. And I think that's a pretty reasonable. I'm not thrilled about a law like this, but I'm certainly not opposed to it either. So it's okay. But when he's starting to expand this, medical leave, paid, even family leave. I mean, paying. I mean, you're forcing employers to pay for it. That's just, I'm not comfortable with that. I mean, unless the government pays for you, the employer shouldn't be paying someone if you're not working for them. So it's just very difficult to, the practicality of such a plan is very much dubious, because they're just going to fire you, and you can't prove that. And if it's going to cost them so much every time somebody leaves, then they're just going to, for a break, they're going to discriminate on you when hiring you based on your likelihood of taking a break. And all these things for the government to be poking its head, how do you say, to be meddling in these kind of things. It's very difficult to do this effectively, and mostly what you have is employers that can get around it. They're smart enough to circumvent the government. They get away with it, and others don't. So that's just exacerbates the problem. Doesn't ameliorate it. So sick leave. Again, I would be open to these leaves being unpaid, but when it's paid, no good. I don't like that. Vacation. Like I said, there's no reason for the government to get involved in this. You can have the private market figure this out. We already have many employers giving paid vacation. That's a very reasonable thing to do, but it's done through competition in the private labor market. In other words, employers do that to attract labor. Okay. Um, all right. So one of the ways that Sanders wants to uh, give jobs for everyone, he calls it jobs for all. So one of the ways he does that is by expanding the government. So the government will hire a lot of people to do work. So, for example, infrastructure, rebuilding roads, bridges, playgrounds, tunnels, etc. So the government needs to hire millions of workers to do that. And this is true. Everyone says it. And by the way, Trump also campaigned on this, and I also supported him because of it. So I agree with this. I think this is a venerable, admirable objective, and I see no opposition to this. There's actually, I am a constitutionalist, and I don't like when the government does things that are not in the Constitution. So the Constitution, strictly speaking, doesn't really authorize the federal government to do these types of projects. So I would have liked to see a constitutional amendment for this. But other than that, in terms of a an admirable goal, societal goal, I think it's up there. Like we want to uh, do this type of work. We want to do infrastructure rehabilitation, and we also want to provide jobs. So this is it's a win-win. Sustainable energy. I'm with him 100% on this. Again, I'm not 100% sure that the federal government should be doing this. I'm actually quite, I actually take that back. I'm skeptical on that, whether the federal government is the right agency for that. But when I said that I'm with him 100%, I mean that yes, as a societal goal, we should aim at shifting from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And it's a very worthwhile pursuit. It's worthwhile not only socially, but also in terms of the environment, but also in terms of economically, because eventually fossil fuel is going to run out. So, it can be a losing proposition. Early childhood education. So he believes that a lot of people are going to be employed in that if the government makes it universal and pays for it universally. And elder care. Okay, so the last two, people working in early childhood and elder care, these are not quality jobs. So I'm not that tickled by this. At the end of the day, if you really want to have jobs for everyone, you want to give them jobs that are that are enjoyable, that they enjoy doing, and you want to give them jobs that pay well. And these jobs that he just enumerated, early child care and elder care, I think a lot of people, oh yeah, sure, if the government pays enough, they'll do it, but they're going to be miserable. They're not going to like it. And so, I'm sorry. So yeah, there are certain people who are more inclined to do it. I think women in general um, are more prone to do these types of work, but I still think that a lot of people are not going to enjoy it. So I'm not very thrilled about these types of work being know, the uh, the channel through which the government offers jobs to people. Okay, Social Security tax income over for those who earn over $250,000 a year. I support it. Yes. So currently we have a regressive Social Security tax. Up to 125 you pay, but what you make above that you don't pay taxes on. So that's a regressive tax, and of course there's a reason for that, which is that the Social Security payout is also capped, right? So why am I paying? Says the rich man. Why am I still paying Social Security tax on income that I earn over 125 if I'm not taking anything out based on that tax, because my payout is already capped. So what's the point? Why am I paying? So I get it, but like I said, the problem, like I said earlier, a big problem currently with our economic system is that people who make a lot aren't able to make even more. That's a very, very big problem. The Matthew effect, as they call it. And so I think that it's so so to put it this way, a person who's making, let's say you're earning $500,000 a year. Not all of the $500,000 earned, uh, because you're already making 200,000, therefore it's a lot easier for you to make the additional 300,000. For somebody who's only making 60,000, it's a lot harder for him to make the next 20,000, right? So it gets progressively easier for you as you make more and more money. That's the thing that I'm not comfortable with, and that's the reason why I think that a more progressive rather than regressive tax on this would be called for. Okay, on foreign policy, I mostly agree with Sanders. Again, like I said, it's a close call. I agree with him a lot on a lot of things. I am opposed to Trump on the Iran deal. I did not like it when he scrapped that. I think Obama was right. I cheered Obama for it. I think he was. That's one of the things that he did right, and I just think he made a very poor judgment there. I mean, obviously the establishment did not stop him on that. They resisted him on a lot of other things, but they didn't stop him on that because they love war. Because there's a lot of war profiteers in the establishment. So yeah, so they love war with Iran. Um, but it was just the wrong thing to do. Like Trump is looking at this like as a businessman, and he says, "Oh, Obama gave him like $700 billion or whatever." No, that's not 700. It was, I don't know how much it was, but um, I think it was more $70 billion. I think. But anyway, that's what he sees. But what he doesn't recognize is that yes, we imposed economic sanctions on them. Remember that. So it's not so simple. We're not just giving them money. It's money that they. Okay, it's a complicated subject, and I actually myself don't know it that much. But overall, it's not accurate to say that we just gave them money. So I think that Trump was right on this, Obama was wrong, and so I support Sanders' advocacy on this, that we should restore the Iran deal. So all the other things, I'm basically, I'm a non-interventionist, so I'm definitely with Bernie on all those things. Bring the troops back home, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq. I am averse to foreign entanglements, period. We just shouldn't get involved. Okay. The VA. I am not a fan of the VA. And I find it a little bit strange, a little bit odd, that Bernie Sanders would have this on his platform, since it's really unnecessary. Because if he advocates Medicare for all, then the crux of the scandal regarding the VA was on medical care, right? Everyone knows that when it comes to medical care, the VA is behind. When you schedule an appointment, you can't see a doctor, and etc. So that yes, they're overtaxed and they're overextended when it comes to providing medical care. So, but this is exactly the kind of affair that is already covered by Medicare for all. So why do we need to distinguish between? Why do we need to specifically single out veterans for this? So I'm not comfortable with that. In general, I believe that veterans already get a good enough package, and I always shudder whenever I hear people talking about veterans. It always strikes me as pandering. And by the way, I definitely dislike this about Trump, because he always talks about, oh, our vets, our veterans, and I always cringe when I hear that. I just enough, like please, the veterans have enough. They get plenty of benefits. And also keep in mind that compared to many decades ago, they are no longer risking their lives nearly as much. They're actually, in fact, they're not risking their lives. It's a far cry from what used to happen. Like when you fought, let's say, for example, in the Civil War, I don't know the exact numbers, but let's say a third of the people died. In the Second World War, I think it was like 50,000 people who died. There was a grave possibility, a serious chance that you will die. In Vietnam, a lot of people died. In Iraq, fewer people died. In the recent war, only 4,000 people died, which is significantly less, and so on. So we fight wars much more effectively and much more safely nowadays. And so overall, I think that a lot of the compensation package that we have for veterans is based on this notion that, oh, they're so courageous and they're sacrificing their lives for our country, when that is no longer, in fact, the case. It is a voluntary choice. The draft is gone for a long time now, and people make that choice not because they're patriotic. They make it because it's a good choice to make. You get good training that you can later parlay into the private sector. You get very good benefits while you're there. You get VA medical care for life, which I think is wrong. They should scrap that. There's no reason why you should get this type of benefit for life. You're not in the military anymore. What other job gives you benefits for life after you retire after 3 years or 4 years? I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't. So if anything, I think the VA should be curtailed, not expanded. Okay. The one thing that I really now I'm going to get to. Oh, okay. So now I'm going to get to. I'm talking for 35 minutes now. All right. So let me briefly touch on two things. One thing that I very much agree with him on, and one thing that I'm very much opposed on. So the one thing that I very much agree with on is Medicare for all. Why do I agree with Sanders on this? Because my position is, and this is the principal reason why I supported him in 2016, and why I have a very soft spot in my heart for him. So why I support Medicare for all? Because I do believe that it's no different than fire and police care. Care is it? Protection. Fire and police protection. Why is medical care any different? The way to justify, for example, why we get free police service is that we don't want to have a society where people get raped or murdered and you have to pay, and if you can't afford to pay the police, that you won't be safe. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? Who wants to live in a society like that? And the same applies to fire, right? We don't want to say that if you didn't pay your bill, we're just going to let your house burn down, and then other people, your neighbor's house, are also going to get burned down, right? Rather, what we would do is we're going to force everyone to pay into the system, and everyone is going to be automatically protected. So, in other words, there are certain aspects of life, there are certain fields of life in which we don't nurture, we don't cultivate an open and free capitalistic market where people choose to pay and receive services rather than are forced. Okay, in certain areas of our life, we force people. You must pay for it, and you will receive it for free. And medical care is one of those things. People should be taxed on it, and they should receive it for free. It's so basic to human existence, and you can't separate. I mean, the traditional argument is, oh yeah, sure, we're going to give you emergency care for free, but not conventional care. And I just don't accept this. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. The distinction doesn't work. Now, I would still be against the government supporting cosmetic and voluntary types of procedures, but a normal doctor's visit and a normal pill or an antibiotic for a cold or whatever it may be, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be covered. I mean, this is just a basic necessity that people need, and so it should be covered. Okay, now to the things that I oppose him on, very much vehemently oppose. When it comes to women's rights, quote unquote, almost every single thing on that list I oppose him on. So protect Title IX, which is a government pressure on universities not to discriminate, which has come to be construed as meaning that they have to, which has come to be construed as meaning that the government has to, under the Obama administration, to pressure the universities to really go down hard on accusations of sexual harassment and sexual assault and rape, quote unquote. So anyway, I think this is very misguided. Certainly the way it's being interpreted, but even the way it was enacted, I don't think the federal government should have any role, zero role in education. So, but even if it does, it's just very, very silly stuff here. And it has had a perverse effect on the environment in schools. Now men are basically being suppressed and discriminated against and being unfairly treated. So I'm actually a little surprised that he would actually even bring it up, and like, is he not aware of all the problems that men have been experiencing with Title IX? So I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay. So sexual harassment in the workplace. I disagree with this. This whole thing is baloney. It doesn't exist. It may have existed in certain places in the past. Who knows? But at this point, at this age, we've been beating this way too much, and it just, we've punished people. The Me Too movement has gone way overboard in doing this. And yes, there is such a thing as sexual harassment, and it is possible for a woman to be harassed. But mm, the overwhelming number of cases where we hear nowadays that when I say, "Oh, I'm being harassed," what they're talking about is, yeah, a man is hitting them. Then, okay, so tell them that they're not interested and move on. Just because you're working with them doesn't mean that they're not allowed to woo you, try to pursue you and try to hook up with you. I mean, after all, we still live in a society where the man makes the first move, right? So just because, I mean, this is a perfect place to get to know someone and make an effort to try to befriend you romantically. And so if you don't like it, then sure, tell them you don't like it, and that's it. But nowadays, people consider just the mere gesture, the mere overture, they already consider that as sexual harassment. So, and especially if it's done by a superior, they equate any type of advance as being harassment, which is a big error. It's a factual error, but it's also a moral error to make. Okay, fund abortion. I am. I don't have a strong position on this. I mean, on the one hand, like I said, I want the government to I want the government to pay for all medical care, right? So how do you distinguish between? Oh, also, I am very much in favor of women's right to abortion, in the sense that definitely the federal government should not make it illegal, but even on a state level, I don't think the states should outlaw it. So combining these two, you would think that I'm leaning in favor of the government paying for it, but I'm not, because just because it shouldn't be against the law for you to do it, and just because I'm providing free medical care, I'm proposing or advocating for free medical care for everyone. People should be able to go to a government clinic and just be treated for free. Just because I'm doing those two things doesn't mean that abortion should be considered an essential service that the government should cover. So I'm a little conflicted on this, because on the one hand, I get it that it's not really a cosmetic service. It's not really voluntary. It is voluntary, right? But on the other hand, if it was an accidental pregnancy, and I know, and we can go back and forth, it's debatable, because even accidental pregnancies, you did something that was negligent to get there, right? It wasn't a rape, right? So if it were a rape, then sure, yeah, definitely they have the moral high ground. But in most cases, you just didn't take the proper precautions, and then you come into a government clinic and you say, "Hey, do an abortion on me." And so, aside from the fact that many people find it morally repugnant to do an abortion, and like I said, I don't think the government should be involved in this. But now now you're already coming into a government clinic and you're forcing the public to pay for it, and it's so. You see where I'm going with this, right? So now you're involving other people, essentially the public, in making a moral choice that they possibly find repugnant. So so it's not so clear to me whether to support it, whether to support free abortions in government clinics. But like I said, it should definitely be legal. I support its legality. I certainly think that the federal government should not be involved in making it illegal. Which brings me to Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade prevents states from banning it. And I'm very much against that too. Just as much as I am in favor of states not banning it, I'm also opposed to this is getting confusing here, I know. I'm opposed to the federal government getting involved in any shape or form in state affairs. Right? This should be a state matter, not a federal matter. And Roe v. Wade limits the state's ability to outlaw abortion. And I think that's wrong. Again, I don't want the state to ban abortion, but I don't want you interpreting the Constitution to mean, disingenuously interpreting the Constitution to mean that the state is not permitted to make any laws on this. They are permitted. And that's their duty towards their elected constituency, towards their electorate, their constituency. It's their obligation to represent them. And if the majority of the state wants to ban it, then that's it. And now, for the liberals who are panicking, oh, they're going to ban abortion. Hey, calm down, dude. You probably live in a liberal state. And again, I'm proposing state sovereignty here. And so your state is not going to ban it. We know that. You know that. So why are you panicking? And also keep in mind that even if you live in a state that bans it, you can always, as a last-ditch effort, you can always travel to a state that allows it. So I don't see any. It's really very unconvincing to make an argument that women are going to suffer if you overturn Roe v. Wade. But even if they would suffer, it's on principle you can't support it. You can't support this idea that the government should interfere and override the will of the state, especially on a thing that is clearly the Constitution does not delegate this power to the government. So it was wrongly decided. I emphatically say this: it was wrongly decided by the court, and it should be overturned. So I'm against Roe v. Wade. Violence Against Women Act. There is a law like that. I have no idea what it is, like the details of this, but I'm against it. I don't think all violence should be outlawed. And whenever we start singling out certain victim groups, we're going to protect you. Like hate crime should be worse than another crime. Like I don't like these laws, and they encourage victimhood. They feed this this sensation by certain minority groups that were victims. Okay, they actually feed that sentiment, and that's not good. We want to eliminate it, not make it worse. And part of making it worse is by continuing that narrative, right? Allowing that narrative to continue by singling them out, by treating them special. And we shouldn't treat them different. Everyone. Violence is violence against everyone. Why is it Violence Against Women Act? Why isn't it Violence Against Men Act? And if you're arguing that women are much more vulnerable than men, I disagree with you on that. They're not. They're not. Men aren't like cruel animals who would just, it's just a completely erroneous assumption that they're going to just attack a woman because they're vulnerable. That's not true. So anyway, I don't want to go into details on this, but I'm against this act. Okay. Equal Rights Amendment, definitely against it. I don't know what it says exactly, but I'm against it. So on social issues, to summarize, there is hardly anything in this that I support. Equal pay, definitely against it. I don't think there's an equity gap. And by the way, this is this single issue that I opposed Sanders on the most in 2016, is the pay equity. I remember him talking about it prominently, and I was always, no. I support you on everything else but this. There is no pay equity. I deny its existence, and I certainly deny any government involvement in this. We need to let people and employers decide on their own how much you're worth, and they're not deciding it based on you being a woman. It's deciding it based on their job needs and based on your likelihood, based on whatever data they want to use, and your likelihood of being a good, poor, excellent. They rate your chances of being a good employee, and they pay you accordingly. And that's the way the system works. And there is no need for reform. And if you change anything in this, you're making it worse because there is no problem. Anytime you attempt to fix a problem that doesn't exist, you're making it worse. So this is one of the longest monologues I've ever had. It's been 50 minutes. But anyway, you get the, to summarize, there's a lot of things in Sanders' policy proposals that I no longer support. or that he has gotten more progressive while I've become more conservative on. So at the in the end, in the end, yeah, it doesn't seem like I will be. When I have to pull that lever between Trump and Sanders, I'm not going to say it's a slam dunk. I'm not going to say it's easy because there are, like I said, there are many things that I support, and like I said, the sentiment of like Trump never talks about the problem of income inequality, and that's something that I strongly believe in. So that kind of like gravitates me towards Sanders, but other things repulse me. So in the end, I don't think that I'm going to be voting for him. Okay, thank you all for watching.